The Metropolitan Police has promised to increase its patrols in London with special focus on the Jewish community after 3 arrests were made at pro-Palestinian rallies outside Downing Street and the Israeli embassy. Around 5,000 people gathered last night, with protesters among them shouting pro-Hamas slogans. Speaking at an event at a synagogue in London last night, the Prime Minister said the police would clamp down on any behaviour that falls foul of the law, adding that anyone supporting Hamas here would be held to account.
I know that at moments like this, when the Jewish people are under attack in their homeland, Jewish people everywhere can feel less safe. We've already seen vile words on our streets and attempts to stir up community tensions. I say, not here. Not in Britain. Not in our country. Not in this century.
Joining me now from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool is Danny Stone, Chief Executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. Also joining us, Charlotte Korchak, Senior Educator at Anti-Semitism Charity Stand With Us, who's live from Jerusalem. I think we'll go to Charlotte first. Charlotte, good afternoon to you. Can you explain what it's like today in Jerusalem?
So I arrived back to Jerusalem today from Los Angeles, where I was spending the holidays with my family, my sister and her 3 children. And I walked through the streets of Jerusalem, a city that I've lived in now for about 15 years of my life, 4 when I was a young kid living through the Second Intifada, wave of terrorism that struck Israel between the years of 2000 and 2004. And the streets today were eerily similar to that time period. They were quiet. At 1 p.m. in the afternoon, when usually the streets would be hustling and bustling with tourists and students and just Israelis living their lives, it was almost a ghost town. Felt like war.
And schools are closed and shops are closed and people are told to stay inside.
Yes, people are told to stay inside as much as possible. People in different parts of the country were told to gather food and supplies for 72 hours just in case. Some supermarkets have opened. There were a couple restaurants that were opened, but mostly things are shut down.
And can you explain the feeling? Because certainly among the Jewish community in this country, the United Kingdom, nearly everybody knows somebody who has either lost somebody or has somebody missing or was involved in some way in the barbaric terrorist attack on Saturday. So in Israel, everybody knows somebody who is caught up in this in the most deep, visceral kind of way, right?
Yeah. Israel is a country of 9.5 million people, 9.7 million, I think we just broke. This is a tiny community, and the Jewish community around the world is only 15.7 million. We are a blip, and so we're a giant family. Everybody knows everybody, and even if you don't know somebody directly, you feel like you do. Israelis, Jews around the world have spent the last 36 hours scrolling on Instagram and on Facebook, seeing these horrific videos, one that is being shown, and much more horrific videos. Obviously, this was as the attack was about to ensue, but most of us have also just seen photos. Photos, first of all, of people who are missing, and then photos of people who have been killed. Right before I got on this broadcast, I read a story of a friend of mine's cousin whose husband was killed. They were just married 7 months ago, and they were preparing for their lives together. And that's just one of countless stories that we've read. People are burying their family members as we speak. I want to say some of those names of the British Jewish community. Nathaniel Young is one of them. Nathaniel Young, who was killed. He was buried this morning, and during his funeral, fires were launched at Jerusalem, and people, while trying to bury this individual, had to crouch down in a cemetery and take shelter from more rockets that are being rained down upon us. Sheikh Marlowe is a friend of many of my friends. We had a small clubhouse community, and he was part of it. And he is presumed missing, possibly being held hostage in Gaza. Those are just 2 of countless. Over 900 people have been killed. It says more than 1,000 Israelis have been killed on your screen, which means that the number has gone up. And the tragedy is that that number has just continued to go up. You know, for many of us, this started with 100 dead, and that was the biggest shock because the largest attack we've ever had, I believe, in Israeli history of innocent civilians was 38 people in 1978 and 100. And we were shocked. And then the number just kept growing and growing until now it's at 1,000. And the vast majority of those people are innocent civilians who have been tortured, maimed, slaughtered, raped. Babies were beheaded. Families were burned alive. I'm sorry for the graphic nature of what I am saying, but these are stories and photos that we as Israelis are seeing pretty much every moment of our days these days. And the world should know. The world should know the barbarism that we are experiencing from Hamas. They targeted innocent civilians.
I wanted to talk about a photograph that people have seen, which is of, I don't even know how to say it, but it's of Israeli toddlers in what's been described as a chicken cage. They've been stolen away from their parents and families, and they're effectively being sort of paraded in a cage. The atrocities are beyond imagining. I mean, those twin babies hidden by their parents, and both the parents, their young parents, were shot. I mean, it's a cascade of evil. It's a cascade of cruelty. And I suppose what I wanted to say to you was that the world knows, because we hear Benjamin Netanyahu, and we can hear the depth of level of what the response is going to be, that unfortunately this seems like the very beginning, doesn't it, of something that's going to grow and grow.
You know, I've lived in this country now for a total of 16 years of my life. And I've been an educator for a nonprofit organization for 13 years of my life. And I have preached compassion and empathy and understanding. And I'm not going to lie, that's been something very hard for many of us to grasp, knowing the atrocities that have been committed. People are describing this like pogroms, and they are pogroms. This is exactly what happened to the Jews in Europe, where people would come to their villages and rape the women and kill the men and set their homes on fire. And it's so reminiscent of Jewish history. And you say the world sees. And yet there were people, 5,000 of them, rallying in the center of London, supporting these acts of terror, refusing to call it terror, saying that Jews have brought this massacre upon themselves. And they'll say it's not Jews, it's Zionists. But let's understand that 85 to 90% of Jews in the world are Zionists. And the reason why we are Zionists is because we understand that without a Jewish state, Jews are more vulnerable in this world. And that if this was happening in any other country, we would be lucky if we would be protected the way that we are protected in this country. And so it has been these images that you were showing. I don't understand. We are standing here as a community asking, what are people protesting? Because we are being killed.
Charlotte,
we are being slaughtered.
I'm going to leave you there. I hope maybe you'll speak to us again tomorrow so that we can talk about the ongoing situation. It's quite clear that it's unbelievably difficult for you to talk about this, which is absolutely eminently understandable.
If I could just say one more thing.
Yes, of course.
If I could just say one more thing. I started by wanting to say that for many years I have said that every Israeli feels a deep pain knowing that when things like this happen, that our response, unfortunately, will most likely lead to the death of innocent Palestinians. And that's the last thing that any Israeli wants or hopes for. And so I want to say that to everyone watching, that while people are celebrating the murder of innocent Israelis, I am also going to mourn the loss of innocent Palestinians in this tragic fight. And the reason that those innocent Palestinians are going to lose their lives is because Hamas has chosen to embed themselves deep within their civilian populations, making it almost impossible for Israel to recreate deterrent without the tragic loss of innocent life. So we are going to be mourning a lot of innocent life, but I want everyone to remember how this started. An unprovoked attack against Israeli borders that took the lives of over 1,000 Israelis. Charlotte, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we'll come back to you, I hope, tomorrow. Let me bring Danny Stone into all of this. I mean, Charlotte talks about the revelry, the celebration in the centre of London. People celebrating attacks on innocent civilians. So people celebrating, you know, as she said, the beheading of babies, the stealing of old people. And that has always, for years, been conflated in a kind of semblance of anti-Zionism, anti-Israel, but really is basic anti-Semitism. It's racism, isn't it?
Well, look, Vanessa, firstly, thank you for having me on. I mean, we've got very clear laws in the UK, laws against the glorification of terrorism, laws against racial incitement, public order laws, and those laws must be enforced where people are doing those things, where they are glorifying terrorism, for example. Now, if someone waves a Palestinian flag, they go to a pro-Palestinian demonstration, I wouldn't necessarily say that's anti-Semitic. But when someone is running down the street, screaming and shouting in support of Hamas, that is, in my view, glorification. We wouldn't allow it in the case of ISIS or Al-Qaeda. There would be arrests, and I would expect the police to deal swiftly and sternly with a zero-tolerance approach to those that are glorifying and celebrating terrorist acts.
Can you explain a little of why the area of Gaza under Hamas rule has been the cause for those people living there and for those people living adjacent to it of such tension, such conflict, such problems, so many problems over so many years?
Well, listen, the Israel-Palestine conflict, I mean, our organisation works on anti-Semitism. The Israel-Palestine conflict is a source of extreme tension. As you know, there are very strongly held views on either side of it. But what we're seeing here is that tension has been spilling over. I mean, even today, Vanessa, we've seen that there's a three times the increase of anti-Semitic attacks in the UK, and we're expecting it potentially to be even higher than the normal level, right? So we usually would have 100 incidents per month. That's expected to go up beyond 300 incidents this month, and so on. And certainly in 2021, the time of the last conflict in May and June, there were nearly 900 incidents. And this is a small Jewish community, a vibrant community, a proud community, but a small one. And so every single incident has a major impact. So the tension in the Middle East, that place of conflict and tension, importing the conflict here does no good, brings tension between communities. And the Jewish community at the moment is very vulnerable and certainly very worried.
Danny Stone, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Hugely appreciate